I am from beyond. Listen, and all you desire will be yours. Welcome to Spider-Dan and the Secret Balls. Prepare for Prattle.
Secret Ball Stories.
Welcome to Prattle World. I'm your host, the ever-amazing, ever-spectacular Spider-Dan. And in this podcast, I spotlight entertainment's best-kept secrets that the mainstream audience may find boring. And welcome to another edition of Secret Ball Stories, where I invite guests to count down a personal top 5 list in high-fidelity fashion. And we are coming to you, the audience, and it's through Zoom, the majesty of Zoom, the new, funky way we're communicating in this weird and wacky world we live in. So I have, from very far away, the distance, we have crossed this distance. Dennis Whittle is back.
Well, hello, sir.
Hello there. I'm very good. Yourself?
I'm fine. This is really weird.
Yep, it definitely is. I've got headphones on. I've got a microphone, a laptop, a audio interface. It's all going off today. It's very technological. There's a lot of wires. I hope I don't fall over and kill myself doing one of those things.
It's just amazing. You know, technology today just blows my mind. Tony Stark would be, "Ooh, look at this. They can talk through distance."
He built this in a cave with a bunch of scraps.
With just a screen and some headphones.
That's it. That's all he needs. That's all he needs. I mean, that's what he does. But I'm going to get on to Tony Stark a little bit later and a few other people. We are back together once again, and we're talking comic books. And who else am I going to talk comic books with? We are here to talk top 5 controversial comic book moments. So these are controversial creative decisions that have caused a stir in the comic book publication offices or with the fans due to either the poor handling of sensitive topics or the senseless treatment of beloved characters. So have you got a heck of a list? Because I did a lot of research and there's quite a lot of comic book controversies across all the different publication houses or the different publishers. There is a lot. And I wish I could have included more in my top 5 if I could.
I struggled keeping it to 5, if I'm honest. My list has mainly gone for kind of stuff that I've actually read and you know, controversy I've heard about. So I've gone either bought the book or read it. The controversy has come out as I've been reading it. So
okay.
But we could be all day with the amount of controversy that is in comics. Some of the controversy you think, why is it controversial?
Yeah. Well, again, if somebody doesn't like something, it could be, you know, or a lot of people don't like something. It could be termed controversial, or, you know, it depends how it's handled, depends what subject matter they're you know, handling, depends again on the character, if, you know, what they're doing to a certain character, what they've done, what they're potentially thinking about doing. It could be anything. Like we've got a lot of subjects to cover. Shall we just get started? Shall we go for it?
Yeah, I think as you're the captain of the technology, so you are the Tony Stark.
I am.
You are the Reed Richards. Maybe you should begin.
Okay, well, I'm going to read my notes. Ha 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 ha. I'm on it now. Okay, so my number 5 is we're going over to your favorite publishing house. It's DC Comics, and we're going to talk about the Legion of Superheroes. DC Comics has not always been the most forthcoming in regards to diversity and representation. And I think like there was the longest time where they didn't have any black characters, any African American or, you know, black people depicted for a very long time. And there was a lot of talk about them not including them and things like that. So I'm going to talk about one specifically. There's a lot of other kind of similar storylines and similar characters that touched on a similar issue in a very controversial way. But this one is Tyrock. This character is descended from liberated slaves who found an island known as Marzal, which would disappear and reappear on Earth every 200 years. So these liberated slaves made their way to this island, and then it kind of went into a dimensional pocket for a very long time. And they became this kind of very much a bit like Wakanda. They became very, scientifically advanced, but they were quite isolationist as well. So they didn't want anything to do with anybody else or any other nations. And Tyrock was their main superhero, and he had this very odd power where he would scream a certain phrase and it would do something. So he would me, and he'd shoot ice out of his fingers. So very odd power, but he would eventually come to blows with the Legion of Superheroes, but then eventually join them. Do you see any particular controversial elements to this story already, Dennis?
No, I think it's wonderful, man.
You think it's in good taste?
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely not.
Yes, there are lots of reasoning why this is a bit weird and controversial and strange. In fact, there are literally no diversity in this sort of time period.
Yeah,
they've all vanished. Just a bunch of white people jumping around in spandex.
But the thing is, with the Legion, it is quite a diverse set. The whole idea of the Legion is that there's all these different superheroes from different planets, from different races. But and this was the question. It was like the creators were like, well, there's no black people in the Legion, and there's like 30 plus members of the Legion. Where are all the black people? And this was their way of going, oh, they decided to live somewhere else, and that's why. But that's not all of Africa. That's like a small group of African slaves.
They all moved away.
Yeah.
It is a reality warping scream.
Yeah.
And lovely leotard with gold kind of buckles.
Well, I was just about to go into that. So no, it's okay. So our favourite controversial comic book creator, Jim Shooter, so he was 16 years old when he was writing the Legion and introduced a lot of characters. Like he actually wanted to introduce a lot of kind of black characters into the Legion. And he was going to, Pharaoh Lad? He was going to unmask Pharaoh Lad and reveal that he was actually black. DC Comics said, absolutely not. The editors said, absolutely not. We won't do that. So he went, fuck it. I'm going to kill off the character. I don't care now. Because he was like, you're not going to give me my way, my own creative way, so fuck it. And it became a very famous story as well. I think it was Death of the Sun Eater or Death of Pharaoh Lad or whatever they call it. But he said this about the character. He said, I always wanted to have a character who was African American. And years later, when they did that, they did it in the worst possible way. Instead of just incidentally having a character who happens to be black, they made a big fuss about it. He's a radical separatist. And I just found it pathetic and appalling. And that's coming from Jim Shooter.
Yeah, and yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's...
Caught him on a good day.
Must have been. Mike Grell also, posited this question, where are all the black people in the Legion? And he co-created this character. He wouldn't want to tell you he did, but he did. So this is what he had to say about the character. So their explanation for why there was no black people in the Legion was that all the black people had gone to live on an island. It's possibly the most racist concept I've ever heard in my life. I mean, it's a segregationist dream, right? So they named him Tyrock, gave him the world's stupidest superpower. Grell's dislike of Tyrock was strong enough that he deliberately made the character look ridiculous. I gave him a silly costume, and it was somewhere between Elvis Las Vegas costume and something you would imagine a pimp wearing on the street corner. So that is, he tried to sabotage that character because he hated the idea. He thought it was racist. He obviously he's still an artist. He's still got to get paid. So he's going to do whatever's required. But he did everything in his power to make sure that character failed. Paul Levitz, who was a long-running writer on the Legion as well, he literally refused to use him in any of the stories. And he wrote something like 30 years of the Legion. Altogether, he was like one of the big main writers on the Legion of Superheroes, and he said that the character was a bit silly and the superpower, but I think it's the racism. It's mostly the racism, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And there
I think he's recently said that about the racism, hasn't he? I think he's done a couple of books about the history of DC Comics, and
okay.
I think it's the second book he actually writes out in any racist the whole thing was. And it was so, like a year later, I think it was Black Lightning came out, which did it right.
Yeah.
And I think he writes down saying just like how disgusted, a lot of people were about it.
Yeah. Well, they did it. I know they did a similar thing with Black Kryptonians as well, and even Black Lightning started off as quite a racist idea. He was originally called the Black Bomber, I believe, and he was a white guy who, when he got angry, turned into a superpowered black man.
Say that again.
Yeah.
Say that again.
So so he's a white man who got angry, and when he got angry, he would turn into a black man and have superpowers. Surely that's offensive to absolutely everybody on the planet. Like, I don't even know how you could even conceive of such an idea. Because, like, they passed it to Tony Isabella, who had wrote Luke Cage, I think, at the time. And he was like, Jesus Christ, we can't do this. This is highly, highly offensive. And they weren't wrong. It bloody well was. So I chose Tyrock out of those because I think the costume itself is just bizarre, ridiculous. And again, like, he's a bit like, he reminds me a little bit of Vibe. Like George Perez, Vibe was quite a poorly conceived Hispanic character, and George Perez absolutely refuses to draw him even as a full body, because George Perez is known for doing these massive spreads of DC and Marvel characters, and he refuses to draw Vibe. He just feels that character is the most offensive. Look into Vibe as well. Look into the history of Vibe, and that's quite a fascinating story and highly offensive as well. Yeah. So that was my number 5.
Well done. Good
Thank
start.
you. Yeah, off to the races with racism.
Mine's going to be a bit more tame than that.
Okay.
My first one.
Let's hear your number 5.
My first one is a comic, a 5-issue comic by Mark Miller, called Trouble, and it is completely your fault I've even read this, because you mentioned it on a train journey.
I did,
and I was in disbelief, and I went away and read it. Yeah.
So tell us about it.
It is basically the early, even though they're not called Aunt May and Uncle Ben, it's basically an early story of them. The 17 and they're both 17. Aunt May and Mary and Ben and Richard are all teenagers, finishing school and going on holiday to the Hamptons.
Very nice.
How wonderful! How
lovely
beautiful that is.
Sweet.
Within the first 3 pages, Aunt May has stolen alcohol from her dad to get hammered on the way to the Hamptons.
Sounds like Aunt May.
She's already nicked alcohol and started drinking it and drinking, and this is Aunt May drinking and driving on the way to the Hamptons. And then it's just full on who's going to bang who, when, why, and how.
Wow.
Apart from Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben is a bit shy in it, a bit more retiring, a bit more kind of, I want to wait till I find the right one before I have sex. I want to do this properly. And Aunt May just wants to do everybody, every which way she can.
Wow. And
she's not bothered how she gets it. She just wants it. And Uncle Ben wants to say, like, no, May, I'm going to wait till we're married and stuff like that. So what's she going to do? She goes and bangs his mate, his brother, no less, who just happens to be Spider-Man's dad.
Richard Parker. Jesus.
Richard Parker. And the whole scene of them doing the fornication, shall we say. Aunt May, he's in bed, they're like close to each other, and goes around in a purse and pulls out a condom and says, "You've just hit the chatbot, Tiger." I think I've heard that somewhere before. Obviously, this goes on. They have sex. Aunt May gets pregnant.
Right.
And Aunt May's parents are quite old-fashioned.
Just going back. So she gets pregnant with Peter at 17. What the hell happens to her in those 15 years that she looks so old and ragged at 32 years old?
I think it's the worry of the fact that it's implied in the comic that if she tells her mum and dad, they will beat her and throw her out on the streets.
Jesus.
It's not even like it's not even subtle. They call them like, there's a conversation between Aunt May and Mary in it, and she's basically saying that my parents, they won't handle this. I'll be out on the streets. I'll be doing this. I'm doing that. I'm doing the other. She also lives with a homeless guy for a while, and she also grows to actually hate the fetus. She hates Peter inside her. This child,
Jesus.
She absolutely hates it. She's calling it names. She refuses to do anything with it, which is like, this is Aunt May. This is lovely Aunt May.
Yeah.
This is the person that we've grown up with, who cares about Peter, who cares about the, MJ and this and the other. No, not this Aunt May.
No, don't give a fuck.
Not at all.
Wow.
The whole thing comes out because it turns out that Uncle Ben is sterile. And then when she kind of goes to him and says, "I'm pregnant. We've had sex and I'm pregnant." He goes, "Hang on a minute. I can't have children."
Wah, wah.
Actually, it's your brother's.
Wow.
And like she tells him like it's nothing. Like, yeah, there we go.
Doesn't even care.
I mean, like really brutal.
Like, it doesn't even sound like Aunt May. Like, the characterization is all wrong.
It's ridiculous. She's awful in it. She's like, I don't know. She's like Vicky Pollard in it. He's like, yeah, but no, but yeah, but no, but yeah, but I told him to pull out. Yeah, but no, but he didn't. Yeah, but Aunt May. Yeah,
God,
it's awful.
I mean, the title Trouble, like it's like in the UK in like that 60s, 50s, 60s, they used to call it when someone would fall pregnant, when a woman would fall pregnant, they would say, "Oh, she's in trouble," or "She's got herself into some trouble." So I guess that relates to that a little bit, but
yeah, and the dialogue in it is very poor as well. Aunt May is based on MJ. She's got long red hair. She even looks like her in quite a lot of the panels. I think the artist has kind of said that, but it kind of okay. So she has the baby. She has the baby, Peter,
that she hates.
Her and Mary, yeah, she hates. Comes up with this kind of story about what they're going to do with it, and she basically gives the baby away. Goes home, forgets about it. No problem, never happened. While Peter then goes away with a loving family. Well, for a while until they die. Spoiler. And she just goes home and forgets about it. Literally, just goes home, gives the baby away. See you later. Cheerio.
Nothing. This is a character who's warm, loving, supportive, strong woman. Who knows. Obviously, some of the depiction in the earlier comics, she's a bit frail and old and stuff, but she has evolved over time, and she's got a really interesting backstory. I read a story once where she fell in love with a gangster. She used to be involved with like a mob boss, and then Uncle Ben kind of takes her away from that life, which is a great story. It's a great little story, and he kind of comes back, and he's got Alzheimer's and stuff, and he's all frail, and she kind of forgives him for being all evil and stuff, and takes him back to the nursing home. And it's a lovely little story, and Spider-Man's just literally watching her do all these things. He's not getting involved. Why ruin it with something like this? Why take something so sacred and such a beautiful character who's always been there and will always be there, even though she's died about 7 times. Why do it? What for a cheap little mini-series about trying to bring back romance comics?
Yeah, but the whole thing, well, there's no romance in this. She screws him the first time. She'd only met Richard Parker that day and screws him that night. There's not, and that's another one of the things we're saying about her. There's no romance in this comic at all, and they kind of by issue 3, they've forgotten about who Ben is. They don't mention him. He's like, where's he gone? And if you think about I think early on they've established that May can't have children, and May can't have children in it, and Peter's parents are a lot younger than May, but in this they're all about the same sort of age.
Yeah,
I didn't realize this until I read the graphic. Was they did quite a few different covers, and they did a bunch of photo covers of teenage girls in bikinis,
and they are quite young for teenage girls. Like they must be like 14, 15.
They are weird, and they're
uncomfortably young.
Obviously, one's MJ and one's Gwen Stacy. That's basically one's blonde, one's red hair.
Yeah.
And the issues they did when they got released. They got re-released. They did the artwork. I can't remember the artist's name.
I think it's the Dodsons, isn't it? Terry Dodson and Terry. Rachel Dodson, I think.
They got rid of that, and then did his artworks to cover. But when they first released it with these photo covers, which I didn't even realize it, and even the covers would be like, "Ooh,
creepy." They are creepy and weird. Yeah. I think again, it's like it's almost like they wanted to get in that young female crowd or pull in that audience, but it really, from the sounds of it, I've not read it myself. Like a lot of these, I know you've read all your choices. Like there's a couple of my choices I've not really read, and I kind of don't want to read in a sense because I've just like all I've heard about them. I'm like, oh my god, I don't want to even touch that. And I think this is one of those stories, and it's by Mark Miller as well, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right, because I think the photo covers were supposed to be done in the style of 70s teen magazines
yeah,
used to come out. which was unusual anyway. But they just seem a bit off to me.
Yeah.
With the content.
Yeah,
it's not. I've got a daughter. I don't. If they want to appeal to the teenage kind of daughter, to pull this comic off and read, this is not the sort of person I want to.
Well, again, it's like she's clearly not heard about, great power and great responsibility yet from Ben, because she seems like a complete arsehole.
She's awful.
Yeah.
It's just, and I think, if
selfish
into it, the backlash was quite phenomenal.
Yeah.
First two issues sold okay, obviously because of the pre-order system, and then the last two didn't barely sell at all. Graphic did okay because they repackaged it. People weren't happy with it at all. I'm not surprised, and it's kind of now been forgotten about.
Yeah.
Luckily.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Aunt May isn't Peter Parker's mum.
Yeah. I think that's for the best.
And they're not named. They don't give them the full names like Richard is Richie. May, Mary.
It's not May Riley. It's not Richard Parker.
Yeah. It's almost like they kind of thought, we'll see how it goes. We can always say, no, actually, it isn't them at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But we all know it is. But
I mean, it might. Yeah, just awful. It just sounds awful.
It is awful, and it's from your favorite publishing house.
Yay! Thank you, Marvel. Well, we've got a few more from Marvel coming up. Don't worry.
It's okay. DC are racist. You lot are sexist. It's great. Misogynist. Let's get on
there. we're both as bad as each other in regards to our publishing houses. Don't worry. We'll
coming up.
we'll get to it. We'll get to it. So my number 4 is quite a modern one, actually, quite a recent one. About three years ago, tie-in comics, promotional comics. These are quite standard for Marvel and DC. DC did a KFC one. Marvel's done a Subway one. I think DC did a Subway one. Audi, Harley Davidson, that sort of thing. They'll do a tie-in. They might introduce some new characters purely for that issue or that set of comics. They announced at New York Comic Con about 3 years ago that they were going to do a promotional comic with Northrop Grumman. Okay, so you might not know who they are, but they are quite a notorious arms dealer. So Marvel teamed up with an arms dealer to promote a comic that was supposed to promote aerospace technology and children getting involved in science, technology, maths, all the sciences. But it was basically an idea to get them into superheroes and get them into, Iron Man and the Vision and, Nick Fury and Captain America. The Avengers are all here. And this new team, the NGEX. All the fans there immediately tweeted about it. And they were like, Marvel, did you not forget the lesson that Iron Man learned in his first movie and his comic, that maybe being an arms dealer is quite a bad thing? And they were like, shit. And the backlash was crazy on Twitter. It was all over the show. And within days, this was cancelled, like ridiculously cancelled. People said that Marvel were war profiteering. They said it was a disturbing partnership. They were saying every Pakistani village we bomb, we'll give them a free copy of Secret Empire. It was just awful. It was just a very bad promotional deal. And they were just like, we're sorry, this isn't what we wanted to promote aerospace technology, but because there has been all this backlash from all the other stuff that Northrop Grumman do, we're just going to fucking cancel this totally. Just sack it right off. It's a scary world where Marvel think, yeah, that seems like a good idea. That seems okay. I don't know if that was maybe a Marvel decision or a Disney decision, or who knows.
Money decision.
Yeah, money. It's got to be money. It's
got to be on it.
But you would just think for a minute that maybe promoting arms dealers to children is not a great idea, and to put the most famous and popular currently those characters next to this new team of arms dealers, these young kids with got all this technology and stuff. Maybe that's not a great look for the Avengers. It beggars belief.
You thought they'd do a bit of due diligence and look at it, wouldn't they? Let's see what these people actually do.
Oh dear. Yeah, exactly. They were the Stark Enterprises. They were the Hammer, Hammer Technologies. There were all these awful companies. and Marvel's gone, yeah, we love evil corporations. That's our wheelhouse. That's what we want. That's what we want to promote to kids.
We love Hydra. Hydra. They make them the best.
Yeah. And this was the same year that they made Cap. Speaking of controversies, they made Cap an agent of Hydra. So there was a lot of controversy about that. And then this only just added fuel to the fire, really, of the whole 2017's controversy.
Ridiculous.
Crazy. And that was only a short one for me. I don't really have much more to say about that one, but I thought I'd get a more recent one up. But I just think, are you fucking kidding me? Pretty much. Just how?
Fantastic.
How?
It's good because the way I've structured mine is I've got a short one, then a long one, then a short one, then a long one.
So okay, cool.
Really well.
Lovely stuff.
Almost like we've got a hive mind.
Like a Borg.
Yeah, like the Borg. Okay. Mine's a new one as well. Mine's a bit of a silly one because I don't really understand what the issue was with it. But it's Batman Damned #1, aka the Batwang.
Oh my! So, for the people that don't know what the Batwang was, what happened in Batman Damned?
So Batman Damned was launched. Basically, DC have a new label called Black Label, which is an adult-orientated imprint. So the content is usually got a bit sweary in it, bit of sex, this, that, and the other in it. So it's aimed at over 17, as they have in America. So Black Label is an adult. Keep that in mind, adult imprint. Okay. Launch title was Batman Damned, which is a Batman supernatural story, which are lots of different characters in there, and it's basically and who's done it, who's killed the Joker. Okay. So the story kind of follows Batman on the hunt to find out whether he's done it or whether somebody else has done it. And about a third through the issue, Batman is injured. He's been through a bit of shit, as Batman does, and he goes to the Batcave, and he takes off his batsuit. And as he's taking off his batsuit, you see a muscular back. You see his bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the front, you see his penis.
Oh.
Outline and a little bit of helmet of penis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this blew up completely. As soon as I couldn't get Batman Damned in quick enough. People just wanted Batman. And DC decided that they were going to, in every other, in the digital, and they were going to basically get rid of the penis.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came out on digital, there'd be no penis. And they said they're not going to do a graphic novel. They did eventually, but when this came out, they're not going to do it. But if we do, we're going to get rid of the penis as well. So the only way I've seen Batman penis is to get hold of Batman Damned 1. It's an adult comic. It's an adult imprint. It's aimed at people who have probably seen a penis. And I don't see what the big deal was about it. It was literally an outline.
Yeah, it's a silhouette, wasn't it?
Yeah, silhouette. You see a little bit from behind, and then you see a bit of a silhouette, bit of blue colouring. And everyone's going about. Everyone forgot the first issue is great. The artwork's great. The setup of the story is great. The atmosphere, which is built by Azzarello, is amazing. The artwork is great. But
is that Biamo? Lee Biamo?
Yeah. Like, I don't particularly like the way he draws Batman, but the setting and everything was very. The atmosphere was great. Proper kind of ghost story type, all supernatural. Yeah. And everyone just goes on about the penis. Literally the penis. That was it. Batwang. And this comic went from being, I think it was £7.
Yeah.
80 quid, 90 quid.
Jesus Christ.
The kind of artist, I'm not signing anymore. I'm not doing it. It's, this is not what it's about. It's about the story. And it's just about his penis. But again, I revert back to the point. It's an adult comic. It's an adult imprint. It was supposed to be pushing boundaries and being a little bit more kind of
risque,
more edgy. Apparently, I'm not allowed to see Batman's penis.
Right. That's, and again, like you said, it's an adult thing. So it's not meant for like kids to see. It's not meant for people that don't want to read those adult stories. There's like every comic book character has the darker, more adult tales and the more kid friendly tales. That's just the way the characters are. You can repackage them and show them and display them in so many different forms. You can tell that story in so many different ways. And I just think, and it's all it is a few brush strokes. That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's not even. It's not like full frontal, well lit penis. It's not like a porno or a dick pic. It is literally a few bits. Like there's worse. There's worse in art galleries across the world. Of penises hanging out and religious nudity on artwork, on statues. It's no worse than that. It's just that people have just glommed onto it for no real reason.
And they say that DC didn't handle it particularly well. And I think DC just went cha-ching, because saying they're going to, with an every other future publication not going to have it on, just made everybody go and scramble for these books. And there was no second printing, so everybody wanted them. So the secondary market blew up. And DC just kind of shifted. It was their biggest book of the year. Everybody wanted it. So they just went, yay, we made lots of money. But I know the artist, and then we had to change a few other bits, because there's a bit with Harley Quinn. You see Harley Quinn's boobs, and you had to go back. I think the issue was so late because you had to go back and then put speech bubbles over her boobs and things.
Right.
And he's just kind of like, well, if you're going to do that, just don't do a black label. Don't do an adult imprint. Just put it out normal, because you get to see silhouettes of boobs in the normal Batman comic. You know, Zatanna, you've seen her boobs.
Yeah.
And come on, you pick up a Harley Quinn, she's pretty much naked. And Poison Ivy's the same. So if you don't want to push the boundaries and make it more adult and make it more kind of a bit more eyebrow in that respect, then don't do it. Don't tell the artist he's got to go back and change it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it was a bit gratuitous, but that's the point of it. I think that was the point of. Like I saw an interview with him, and he was basically saying that he was told to go in and do what he wanted with it. It's an adult book. Go on, whatever you want to do.
Push the envelope.
And then he was told to go back and change. And so there was a Zatanna bit he had to change. There was a Harley Quinn bit he had to change. There was quite a few other bits he had to go back and change. And he was really, really not happy about it. And this is all because of the Batwang.
One little penis, so much fuss.
Little, quite impressive.
Was he circumcised?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah, fair play.
It's not even a full panel. It's a tiny little.
It's tiny, yeah, tiny. But that's it. It's just
not his penis.
No.
Swear.
Yeah, I mean that'd be a weird penis. That'd be a very odd penis to see.
And, I just like to revert back to the fact it's an adult comic.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. Anyway. And again, it's not the main continuity either. So it's not like it's the Batman you know and love in the main continuity getting his dick out. Who's to say what the Bruce Timm's Batman dick looks like? Who cares? I remember Mallrats. They talk about does the Thing have a big dick? Can Reed Richards stretch his dick into That's always like a fun, stupid conversation. But Batman will have a normal dick. He definitely has a dick. That's it's just biology. He has to have one. Unless unless he's had a change. He's made a transition. That he has to have a penis. That's it's in the name, man. He has to have genitals, male
kid,
genitals.
So you tend to need a penis to have a child with a woman.
And he's also knocked up a Catwoman as well recently as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's had sex with multiple people because he's a guy. That's what that's what he's done. So I never quite understood the first thing you came on. I can get that completely.
Yeah, really.
I'm an adult. I've seen penises.
Yeah, get over it. It's almost like it's a schoolyard thing. It's like hee Willie hee. It's like that. It's like it's so immature. It's just like I'd be reading it for the artwork, the writing, and the story, because it sounds like an interesting story. I might eventually get round to it, but at the moment I'm just like, it's just like what's the point? Like Marvel Max never had these kind of issues, really. Like Marvel Max does the exact same thing. There's nudity, there's sex, there's violence. There's never been, and they know, and they say parental advisory, discretion and things like that. So you know what you're getting into in those books, So I don't get it. Silly.
I don't get it at all.
Silly and stupid.
So there we go.
Right, very good one.
Batwang.
Yeah.
I'm all right.
Wow. So that was your number 4, wasn't it? So this will be my number 3. So I'm going to go with a very controversial. It was controversial at the time, and it was quite groundbreaking. And it's a storyline called Snowbirds Don't Fly, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this one. So this was during the Green Lantern, Green Arrow series written by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams. Groundbreaking because they basically, every issue, the heroes would tackle a social ill or a problem in real life, like a relatable issue. Like there's a famous panel where Green Lantern a black man goes up to Green Lantern and he says, I've seen you save the orange skins, the green skins, but what have you ever done for the black skins? And Green Lantern he can't look at him because he realizes he's right. I've done nothing to help people of color in the world, in my community. Shit. And it brings home this kind of realism. And Green Lantern kind of played the kind of Republican conservative role, and Green Arrow would play the kind of liberal role, and they would kind of bat and forth and they would argue over the issues and how to resolve them. Things like overpopulation, pollution, big businesses taking advantage of people, things like that. But this one really hit home, and it was basically about Oliver Queen's sidekick, Speedy. He became a heroin addict. Like, he got hooked on smack, and the cover is quite famous because it shows Speedy directly injecting heroin into his arm. And that's quite shocking. That's quite a shocking image. Like, you wouldn't have seen that on TV. You wouldn't have seen that in the movies, particularly. But it was on a comic book that was potentially aimed at children and other people. Well, it was aimed at children because it was to convince children not to get into drug addiction, to get hooked on heroin and things like that. And there was a similar story with Spider-Man where Harry Osborn took LSD, and there was he had a big kind of overdose thing going on. There was another lad who threw himself off the building, and the comics code at the time were they wouldn't allow any showings of drug use. So eventually they both books said, we're going to print this because the government have asked us to do this, like to help the youth of America. We're going to just print it without your code. So fuck you. And they did. And this comic won several awards. I think it was Harvey Awards and all the other kind of comic book awards around at the time. And it was quite an interesting issue because Green Arrow obviously is in this one, he's quite liberal, and he doesn't want to be violent necessarily. And he's really shocked at this point because he's like, on the cover, Green Lantern's like, you have all the answers, Green Arrow. Every time you've got all these answers. But what do you say to this? And Green Arrow hits Speedy, hits this teenage, drug user, and he's like, he's horrified. He doesn't know what to do. He's responding on an emotional level. He's not actually thinking about it because it's really hit home for him. This one particular issue has come home to roost. And all the other ones have happened relatively to strangers in these stories, but this one really hits home, and it's quite an interesting issue. And Speedy would go on to have quite a horrible life. Yeah, you can read Cry for Justice, Justice League, Cry for Justice, Rise of Arsenal. He's had a hard time of it. He had a child with a supervillain who she went on and nuked a whole country. I do really like the character. It's just a shame that he's been treated like this as well. I think the story's good. I do think the story's good, but I think subsequent stories have not been as kind to Speedy, and they're controversial in their own right, in their own way. You can definitely look into those, but this the
one with Arsenal, isn't there, when he beats up everyone, he's high as a kite, and then Batman beats the crap out of him.
Yeah, and
Arsenal on the Outlaws.
Yeah, and I think he's so high at one point he kills people and saves a kitten or something, and he thinks it's his dead child. Oh, that's right, she dies as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this book a lot. I think it's well written. I think the artwork's great. I think it's well written. And it is one of those that you kind of read and you're thinking, what would you do? You've been super liberal, you've been saying all these things, and all of a sudden, his reaction is, I think it's kind of like, you don't expect his reaction to be, because he does wallop him quite hard.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, proper backhand. Gives him a proper backhand. Yeah. He hits a child effectively, But I kind of understand where he's coming from. It's not like he's not doing it maliciously. He's just like out of shock.
It's a reaction, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's more like an impulse. It's more like it's a reflex.
Yeah, I just think it's I do feel like reading it now. I read it in the last year or so. I think the whole story, or last couple of years. It's really great artwork, great stories. Some of them are better than others, and I do feel that sometimes the writing is a little heavy-handed, but it's still, again, it's going back to a time where we didn't talk about these things, so we kind of had to be heavy-handed about it. But yeah, overall, really good.
We weren't allowed to tell these stories originally, were they? That's you were saying the point, the comics code and DC and stuff, and all the top publishers kind of shied away from these sort of things that O'Neill and Adams were trying to do. And even now, Adams fought for the rights of things, creators, and rights. He's very much of John Stewart was his creation and things like that. So he's very much of this liberal kind of mindset, and he really pushed it. And he was,
John Stewart debuted in this series as well, in the Green Arrow, Green Lantern.
Yeah.
So
just saying, he's kind of Adams's persona at this time was very much of he's a bit of an asshole and a bit of this, that, and the other. But he had things he wanted to say. He was a child of this time. He wanted to rebel against people saying you can't do this. And having a kind of a brief conversation with him about it, he kind of looks at it now and thinks, well, I could have perhaps done things slightly different. But he stands by everything he's done, which is fair enough, isn't it?
Yeah. What else can you do? I know he was saying that he was kind of helping out the kind of drug addict centers and would try and give money when he could as well. Neil Adams specifically, and I know Denny O'Neill struggled with alcoholism as well. So there you go. And he that's a really good story. He wrote Iron Man for a bit, and he basically puts Tony on like a 2 or 3 year bender and has James Rhodes take over as Iron Man, which is a really good run, really underrated run. Introduces Obadiah Stane as well. Definitely, that one's definitely worth a look as well. And Demon in the Bottle, the original story is great too. So so that was my number 3. What's your number 3?
Well, mine is going back to a different time, shall we say?
Okay.
Mine's Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, number 106.
Okay.
And the title of this issue is "I Am Curious." Brackets black. Close brackets.
Okay.
So this the whole premise of this story is Lois Lane turns herself black for a day, turns herself into a black lady for a day, so she can go and do a bit of investigative journalism in Little Africa. Saying this out loud is a bit weird.
Yeah.
The whole idea behind the story came from a good place. If anybody reads the history about how it was written and stuff, it came from a good place. It came from trying to kind of, I was talking about with early stories, and trying to different characters, trying to put more black people in comics, trying to put more diversity. They mess up big style.
Yeah.
For some bizarre reason, Superman in the Fortress of Solitude has a machine that turns you black.
As you do.
Don't know why.
I mean,
explained.
Yeah. What for what reason?
Who knows? And so Lois goes into it because she's at the beginning she's trying to get into this area called Little Africa, and she's like, because she's not black, it's kind of shunned. You're just you don't know what's going on. You don't know what it's like to live here. So she goes away and thinks, they're right. I don't know what it's like. So she goes in this machine and comes out black. Then spends about a third of the book looking, and there are some hard-hitting stuff. There's poverty, there's racism, there's all kinds of things that she's like, oh my god. And then she's also a victim of racism, so she sees it firsthand. And again, you think, it kind of makes sense. But then it ends, and the ending, it's a little bit weird. So she goes through all this, and you think she's going to come out of it and she's going to be a better person. Yet she goes to Superman and says, even though I'm a black woman, would you still marry me? And Superman pauses for quite some time.
Oh dear.
He pauses that long that she says, right, I get it, you won't marry me even black, and goes back in the chamber and turns herself white again.
Ooh. Ouch.
So is Superman a racist? I don't know.
I sincerely hope not.
Yeah, me too. Maybe he was just shocked. I don't know. But it is I own this comic. And it is kind of, the bits that they do really well are showing racism, are showing what people are. Little Africa's a terrible name for it's a ghetto, obviously. Yeah. A bit like Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff.
Harlem, something like that.
Harlem and stuff. And you've got these, the Bronx and stuff. So you've got these things happening. And obviously, Lois Lane's never had it done to her. She has it done. She's shocked. But she's shocked enough not to that bothered about it that she goes away and just says, Superman, I'm black. Would you marry me? Nah. Yeah.
Like why? Like if you've done all that kind of stuff, like I get the whole that you can't really understand the plight of somebody who from a group of people that are marginalized and looked down upon, and and just treated poorly. You can't get that unless you experience it, firsthand. Like, you'll never truly understand what it is to be in somebody else's shoes. So I kind of get the idea. I can understand where they were coming from, but why tag that bit on the end? Why is that so important? Like, I know the Lois Lane comics were not the most, forward-thinking comics of all time. She was mostly trying to trick Superman into marrying him, I think, in most issues, or something like that. So it was not really the Lois Lane we know today or think about today. So I can see that the good intentions, but you've just butchered it. You've absolutely you've messed it right up.
It completely ruins any message.
Yeah.
Anything that they tried to do ends soon as the last 2 pages of the entire book. And even though the handling of Little Africa is all from her point of view, they do paint the people of Little Africa in not the best light. There's a street meeting where they're just saying, like, we must talk about black people are beautiful, black is some, and it's kind of like street preaching and all this, and you're thinking, okay. There's a scene in which she tries calling a taxi, and the taxi drives past her. She says, "Why you not stopped for me?" "Oh, it's because you're black," and she gets called a racist slur in it, and this, that, and the other. And you kind of think, okay, there are elements in it, but then it's completely ruined.
Yeah.
With Superman going, I don't know. It makes no. She should have just gone back, wrote the story, changed back, and then gone to Perry White. We need to be doing this story. We need to be, the plight of people in this area is discussed. And we need. No, by the way, will you marry me? That's all she's bothered about.
Yeah.
Wow. Discuss.
Wow. So poorly handled, I think, is what I'm going to say about that story. I think
I own it. I bought. I collect Superman anyway. But it was one of those issues that
infamous.
Like I said, I do own all these. I'll go into why I have these comics later on, but I saw it. It's quite a hard comic to get hold of, to be honest, because it's so weird, and it's Lois Lane comics were quite a low run as well. So they weren't in the hundreds of thousands print runs, so it's quite hard to get hold of. So it's quite expensive as well. But it's just worth reading it just to kind of get. When you get to anything, why? You're left thinking, why? It was okay. You could have done so much more. But no, will you mind me? There we go. So there we go. That's that.
Wow. That and I think that's one I've heard a lot and always kind of comes up in lists like this. And here's another one for you from the pages of Marvel Comics. It's Hank Pym, the wife beater. So way back in Avengers 213, in the previous issue, Hank had just come back to the Avengers after a long hiatus. So bear in mind that Hank has had mental issues in the past. He's forgotten who he is. He's taken on other personalities. He's been attacked by Ultron and his memories manipulated. So he's not had the best time. He comes back as Yellow Jacket, is kind of one of his more famous forms, his guises, superhero guises, many superhero guises he has. He violently takes out a supervillain, and he's chastised for it, and he puts the team in danger. So they decide to have a meeting to potentially court-martial Hank Pym. And he starts to have basically a nervous breakdown. He's got this mad inferiority complex on top of all this. So he's not in a good way. He's not in a good place. And what he decides to do, instead of, he feels he has to prove himself to the Avengers. So what he does is he creates a robot, not unlike Ultron, that only he knows how to defeat. So it's unbeatable, apart from this one little button that he can press, or this one little thing that can deactivate the robot. His wife finds out about it. He is incensed. He's mad. He's like, "You don't understand. I need to redeem myself." And he gives her a violent backhand. And it's a very famous panel. You can find it all over the internet. And sends her flying. Later on, the meeting takes place. All the Avengers are there. And Wasp turns up with a black eye and goes, "Hank, you've got to tell him what's going on. You're going to tell him what's going to happen." And the robot at that moment breaks in, starts trying to, destroy everybody, takes out Hank Pym. So nobody else knows how to take out the robot, apart from Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp, or Janet Pym, the Wasp. And she takes out the robot and reveals the whole plot to the Avengers. And they go, "Mate, you're out. You are out of the Avengers." straight away. And Janet files for a divorce. Now, back to our friend Jim Shooter, who wrote this story. Surprise, surprise. He said that this was not meant to be as aggressive or as violent as it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be an accidental tap. So he's kind of thrown his arms in the air. He doesn't see Janet, and he hits her. A bit like maybe Spider-Man in Spider-Man 3, Peter Parker in Spider-Man 3 when he accidentally hits Mary Jane. But the artist didn't interpret it that way and made it a very violent, obvious, definite act. So this story kind of has haunted the character of Hank Pym forever. He's not really ever recovered from this storyline. There's been people who have either ignored it, people have either attacked him for it, or had characters attack him for it, or they've tried to redeem him. And some of those stories work, and some of them are good. And I don't hate him as a character, but this storyline, not only does it trivialize domestic violence and domestic abuse, which is horrendous for anybody, or anybody going through such a thing, but it also kind of trivializes mental health and mental health problems as on top of that, because he comes back to he's got no money, he's not making any friends or anything. And his old enemy, Egghead, finds him, and he basically convinces him to commit a crime unknowingly. And he's arrested and he's put on trial, only for Hank Pym to kind of recover, apologize, and sort of redeem himself. But then again, other writers have constantly brought this up. Tom Brevoort said that the fans, no matter what they do, the Marvel writers do, the fans are not willing to forget Hank Pym did this. And obviously it's an atrocious thing to do. It's a horrible thing to do. And a lot of people feel like it's a blight on the character. It's a blight on his storylines. And again, he's done all these other things to try and make up for it and to be a better hero, be a better person. But yeah, it's such a famous storyline, and it's tragic that it's trying to, again, it's just like it's I think it's coming from a good place somewhat, but it's just ruined. It's just bad, and it'll never really go away. And that's the real reason why the Marvel Cinematic Universe used Scott Lang as opposed to Henry Pym, because Henry Pym still has that black mark against his name.
And I've always took issue with Schuster's kind of comment on this. He's notoriously involved in every aspect of the editorial process of any of the comics he's involved in. And if he thought that was a bit too handy to give it back to the artist and said change it, he's famous for like sending things back and getting really involved in stories, and I think that to be done his way. So him coming out saying it was not supposed to be a light tap, it wasn't supposed to be, it was supposed to be like in the moment. I was like, nah, you'd have seen it. If you thought that, you'd have asked it to be changed.
Exactly right. And in the Ultimates, written by Mark Miller, have you noticed that a lot of the same names keep cropping up when we talk about these controversial moments?
Mark Miller is just, he loves them, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's all he does. Love him or hate him, he's got good stories, got bad stories, but he is who he is. Yeah, he basically reenacted the scene, but it was horrifically violent. It was he slaps her, he grows to giant size, slams her, slaps her, she shrinks down, he gets a bug spray and sprays it on her, poisons her. It's horrific. It's Brian Hitch artwork, but it's just horrible. It just comes out of nowhere as well. He's very obviously a very insecure character, but he just absolutely obliterates her. So if you want a more violent version of this, you can find it in Ultimates, but I really didn't like Ultimates either. Yeah, Ultimates is not a good book for me. I can see why some people like it, but I couldn't get into it. But yeah, there's a lot of things. Like I said, there's been a lot of changes for Hank Pym, a lot of identity changes. He's going, he's not wanting to become an Avenger. He almost committed suicide at one point in West Coast Avengers as well. He's not a well guy. He never has been. His mental brain pattern was the basis for Ultron. So that's why he's so fucking mental as well. It's just really sad. But recently what they did, which I thought was actually quite a good idea, was they actually merged Ultron and Hank Pym together into one being, which I think is a kind of sad, bittersweet end to kind of his story, because he doesn't really have a body anymore. He's kind of just a machine now. and it like an absolutely fucking bonkers machine. But I kind of feel like that's the best way to kind of say goodbye to that character, and kind of put that all to rest. Take him and make him an actual villain, like an out and out villain, as opposed to just somebody who's a hero who's a domestic abuser. Now he's a maniacal murderer who would do things like domestic abuse. He would cause women harm. I think that was one of the better kind of editorial choices they made about Hank Pym as of late.
Good one, but a bad one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's not going to be any honourable mentions. I think there's only going to be runners up in this one today.
Yeah.
Dishonourable mentions, but yeah, I think it's too famous not to not include. I think for me.
No, I agree.
So yeah, cool. So that was my number 2. So on to yours.
My number 2 is very short.
Okay.
It's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I've read it in volume 2. I think
that's right. Yeah. I know exactly what you're going to talk about.
Invisible Man, who's in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, has been a very naughty boy and has been conspiring and giving information about the League to the enemies. Now, this would annoy most people. Fair enough, isn't it? He's going against his colleagues. But Hyde, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, takes particular umbrage to this and bums him to death.
Can you repeat that, Dennis?
Yeah, he bums the Invisible Man to death.
Rapes him to death.
To death. And it kind of comes out of nowhere. He kind of goes into a rage, finds him, hits him a few times, then from behind drops his trolleys and then rapes him to death. And then the next panel you see is just blood everywhere. All over the table, all over Hyde, and he's just sat there. And everyone's kind of going, right then, moving on.
Yeah, I think in the second volume, if I remember rightly, they introduced like John Carter of Mars and the H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds Martians as well. And I think he teams up with the Martians from War of the Worlds. And I think that's why he takes umbrage, as you so put it.
But he bums him to death, Dan.
I know. I've read it. That's probably the most shocking bit of that book for me.
It kind of comes out of nowhere.
Absolutely.
You expect Hyde to probably just pull him in half or beat him or do something.
From what I remember, none of the book is like that. The rest of the book is not like that. It's just like hyper violence. Here it is.
Yeah, and you're thinking, and it's one of those things that you read. You can look at anything and you go back and no, hang on, no, he did. No, he definitely did. And then a few weeks later, you think, no, I'm going to check. No, he definitely 100% did.
He did do that.
It's just bizarre. How it's compared. I don't know. It's one of those things that you kind of just go,
Yeah.
Like if Hyde had done this, or before, because he's quite a violent character in it, but this just kind of rapes the Invisible Man to death.
Yeah,
which we're probably not going to see in the shared universe anywhere soon.
I was going to say it wasn't in the original movie, was it? They kind of left that. Left that on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, you're not going to see that at the beginning of Van Helsing, are you?
Oh dear, Jesus Christ!
Bumming Van Helsing to death.
Jesus.
In fact, I can't think of any other time where I've read anything where someone's been bummed to death.
No, I don't think so.
I have nothing more to say on it. That's it. Made me feel a bit funny, to be honest. I didn't like reading it now. It's I'm cool with it because I kind of, but it was like what?
Yeah. Yeah, to kind of flashback and go do a second take on those because it's just bizarre.
It's the scene afterwards where he's just covered and everywhere he's covered in blood, and you're thinking he must have dragged him all the way around the room.
Yeah, it's horrendous. Like that's the thing is that your imagination is filling in the blanks, and that's almost more disturbing because you see him drop his trousers, you see the aftermath, you don't really see what actually happens in real time. It's not like Watchmen where you kind of get a gist of it. It's really.
But he's so pleased with himself. He sat at the table with a big smile on his face, pleased with himself, and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to move on now. But I'll tell you one thing. I've not read any more League of Extraordinary Gentlemen since that issue.
I finished both volumes. I enjoyed them on the whole. It's very, very different from the movie. The movie is in name only, and that is it. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing else in relation to it. I would recommend it just because it's a totally different kind of animal. But yeah, prepare yourself for that scene. I think generally I quite liked it. I like the artwork. I think the writing was pretty good. I like all the literary characters like Fu Manchu and Moriarty, all these kind of characters that come in, John Carter, all this stuff. I thought that was a really cool kind of shared universe idea. Which maybe one day they'll actually do proper and good, but who knows? Maybe not.
Out the bumming scene.
Yeah, maybe leave that bit out. Who knows?
We don't need that.
Yeah, I don't need. I mean, I've already, it's already in my mind. I don't want to see it visually anymore. It's disturbing enough in there
that you have to see it. If you Google it, there is the panels there.
So yeah, you can find the panels. If
you feel you need to see it and have a look at it, but there's no explanation, no big thing. It's just I think it's shocking.
Yeah.
So that's
it's probably like Hyde probably goes, "What's the worst thing I can do to him? This," and that's it. Awful. Speaking of sexual assaults, Dennis, I've got one.
Really?
Yeah.
Do tell.
So this is my number one. So this is Ms. Marvel gives birth to her own rapist. Celebratory issue.
A second.
Yeah, you gotta take that in. Ms. Marvel gives birth to her own rapist. Okay, celebratory issue. Avengers 200, double-sized issue. Big celebration. All the characters on the cover. George Perez artwork. Everything's looking good. So in the previous few issues, Ms. Marvel, while chatting to the Scarlet Witch about having children, falls pregnant herself, and she does not know who the father is, and also her pregnancy is sped up, and she gives birth in a few days, in the space of a few days. She has no idea. She doesn't know who the father is. She's not been with anybody that she knows of in recent times to have this speedy birth. She had no idea. So all the Avengers, she gives birth to this baby, weirdly, very unusual birth for Dr. Donald Blake to deliver. And then everyone's congratulating her. Beast is saying, "Oh, I can be his teddy bear. I can be your baby's teddy bear." Wasp is going, "Congratulations. Oh, what a beautiful baby." And Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers, is there going, "I don't know who the father is. That's not my baby. I feel like I've been used." And everyone's like, "What's her problem? What's her issue? Why she got such a bad mood on her?" Like Wonder Man's like, "Yeah, you've got everyone's got their problems. Not quite Wonder Man." He's like, "I don't understand women." Just horrific. And Wasp doesn't really understand. And she's like, "Oh, who knows what?" She's talking to Joe Castor, who's a robot. She's trying to understand human emotions. She's like, "Yeah, some people even humans don't know how to deal with human emotions." It's like, fuck off, Janet. This woman is going through something horrific. And you're just acting like this. The Avengers are awful in this issue. This is the worst depiction of the Avengers I've ever seen. Awful. Just horrible, horrible people. So basically, we find out that the baby is aged to adulthood in the space of a few hours. And he reveals himself to be Marcus, who is the child of Immortus, who's a time-traveling villain of the Avengers, an old villain. And what he did, he got abandoned. His dad died. Immortus died, and he was abandoned in limbo, basically, which is where Immortus lives, in the middle of non-time. So time doesn't really pass there. And basically, he had to find a way to escape. So he pulled Ms. Marvel out of the time stream, abducted her without her knowledge, brought her to limbo. He plied her with food. He made Shakespeare write her sonnets. He gave her everything she wanted. Just to woo her, and he does not do that good a job. So then he uses his machines to psychically force himself on her. So he forces her to consent to having sex with him. So then he implants himself into her body, and she gives birth to him. It's just an awful story. This just terrible. It's shocking just to read all this out. So basically, when he's grown to full adulthood, him escaping limbo is tearing time apart. It's like ripping. There's dinosaurs appearing, knights, you name it. All sorts of stuff's going on. And Carol finally confronts the baby, Marcus, that she's been avoiding. And he says, I'm going to have to return to Limbo. Your world will end. Time will end. It will stop. It'll just collapse the time stream. And she goes, oh, wait, can I come too? Because actually, I'm in love with you. I'm still in love with you. And he goes, yes, thank you. I'm glad you said that. And the Avengers are like, yeah, see you later. Have a great time. Off you go, off you trot. So effectively, in short, Ms. Marvel is abducted, date raped, forced to become a brood mare, shamed by her colleagues, brainwashed into thinking she loves Marcus, and abducted again. And then the Avengers stand by and let it happen. They have no issue with it. Basically, she's raped, and then she's convinced that she likes it. How awful is that?
It's absolutely appalling. And thank you for bringing this to my notice, my friend.
I did. So Dennis wasn't aware of this particular storyline.
No.
We were discussing the women in refrigerators controversy, which is another controversy, and I said, "Mate, that's nothing compared to Avengers 200," which it isn't.
It's amazing. There's so much stuff on the internet about this, and there's been so much published about this story.
It's ridiculous.
Who was credited with writing it?
Jim Shooter.
No, really?
Yeah, what a surprise, eh? What a surprise.
Shock.
Shock and horror. He apparently had this idea for the Ms. Marvel comic, but it never kind of came about, or a Marvel team-up or something. He wanted the Supreme Intelligence, the Kree Supreme Intelligence, to impregnate Ms. Marvel or something. So it didn't really happen. So he kept holding this idea, and he said, this is the issue for it. To celebrate 200 issues of the Avengers, we're going to do this. This was so shocking that a famous article was written about it called The Rape of Ms. Marvel. And that was by Carol A. Strickland, who's a kind of foremost kind of feminist writer and what have you. It even came to her attention, and it's just, a comic book. So this is how crazy this is. Chris Claremont as well, who wrote the X-Men, famously, he wrote almost her entire first series, Ms. Marvel, developed the character, her villains, her lifestyle, her secret identity, her powers, everything. And then he found out about this and was fuming. He was incensed by this. So much so, he wrote an Avengers annual, which basically blames the Avengers and the writers of that particular comic for doing what they did to her. And she like Ms. Marvel is confronting the Avengers. She's in tears. You let me go off with somebody who abused me, brainwashed me, and did horrible things to me, without my consent. I was brainwashed. Could you not tell? How could you not tell? And that was the same issue that introduced Rogue as well, famously. It's crazy. Carol Danvers went to join the X-Men. She hated the Avengers that much. That's how bad it was. That's how bad that whole situation was. And it still does crop up now and again in certain stories. I think Kang the Conqueror had a son that looks like Marcus, because Immortus is a version of Kang the Conqueror, and Ramatut and the Scarlet Centurion, but that's a whole nother podcast on all these kind of characters. but yeah, it's absolutely shocking. Still controversial to this day. Yeah. I couldn't believe it, and just the way the Avengers act is horrific. The only person that does a good thing is Hawkeye, because he doesn't trust Marcus throughout the entire thing, because he's Immortus' son. So he's a villain. He's bound to be a villain. He's going to come out and he's going to be a villain. So he destroys the machine. And this kind of causes the problems. But Hawkeye's made to feel bad about it. But he's the only one that does anything good in the entire issue. There's this discussion with Hank Pym and Wonder Man talking about them men understanding women and how crazy women are. Like, I was like, that's one of the worst panels I've ever read. Just those two characters back to back going, yeah, women, what are they like? Those last two choices kind of joined together just through that conversation. It's just a shocking bit of writing, bit of storytelling. And again, it took Ms. Marvel has had a horrific kind of rise to, like, the fact that we got a Captain Marvel movie with Carol Danvers, from Avengers 200 to there's been a lot of, this is a bit like Hank Pym. This is kind of, dogged her storyline and kind of the black sheep in her history. that kind of keeps cropping up. She even became an alcoholic for a time, which was quite interesting because of all the shit she'd gone through. It's kind of understandable. I think I'd be an alcoholic too after all this, if this happened to me. So yeah, just shocking. But I've told you all about it. You know all about it. It's one of the worst things ever committed to comic book panels, easily.
I have to agree. I have to agree.
Anyway, what's your number one, Dennis?
My number one is probably a comic a comic series that many people wouldn't have read. And I'm not going to go on about it for too long because there were so many things wrong with it.
Yeah.
But it's Howard Chaykin's Divided State of Hysteria.
Okay.
Which the first issue has a lady in a burqa with the American flag made out of the burqa's made out of the American flag. So that's the first edition. That's the first thing you see. First of all, the book is garbage. It's absolutely horrendous. The writing's terrible. The artwork's terrible. The kind of the way the story flows is terrible. The book is garbage. Unfortunately, I do own it. And the reason why I own it, I have this problem that when people tell me I shouldn't read something, I shouldn't watch something, I have to do it to make my own mind up about stuff. The book itself is set a little bit in the future. And it's set around Washington. And it's kind of set in a kind of where America is kind of perhaps heading in some places. This is what the kind of idea is behind it. It's appalling. Like the couple of things I'm going to point out is the first is the trans phobia, which is in the book. 7 pages, 8 pages showing a trans lady being absolutely beaten to almost death. She's picked up in a bar from these CIA people, and it's very clear that they know she's a trans lady. Very clear. They're not hiding anything. It's not a trap. Whatever. Take her back to the room. They start doing what they're doing, and then the beating begins. Oh, you've got a penis, and they beat the living crap out of her. But this goes on throughout the book. Now, it's been said a few times that Chaykin might have a problem with trans people. After reading this, I'm kind of leaning towards that myself. She does defend herself, and she does kill the guys.
Right.
But she's made out to be the villain of the piece. So she's been attacked, raped, and she defends herself, but she's the villain. Okay?
Wow. Okay.
The issue is then it falls around kind of different aspects of America. It's almost like done through drones. So you're seeing aspects of going around. Issue 3, they actually pulled the cover because there's a lady on the front cover hung with the genitalia cut away and a racial slur on the front. And there was this big thing at Image. All the creative Image came out and said you can't do this. You can't put this cover out. And they pulled the cover. But the problem with that cover was it was only in previews. Everybody saw the cover. It was okay to put in previews. It was okay for people to see the cover. And there's lots of racism in it. There's lots of anti-Muslim sentiment in it. There's a lot of anti-American sentiment in it as well, which I think people kind of forget about. Chaykin is basically, he plays both sides here. He's pitching one against the other. He's prodding the bear, seeing which one bites back the most. The writing is so chunky, and the kind of language he's using, it's crap. Now I don't think Chaykin's wrote anything great in a very, very long time. But if he had something to say about the way America is going on, this wasn't the way to say it. And I'm surprised Image kind of markets the way they were doing. Like one of my issues with it was I had to get this online from the States. It was very hard to get in this country because people were saying, "Oh, it's this, it's that, and the other." Yeah. Frankly, I'll make my own mind up about it. I'm a big boy. If I don't like it, I'll put it in the bin. Yeah. Let me read it and make my own mind up about stuff. I'm not a big fan of any sort of censorship. I like to make my own mind about stuff. But it's garbage. Away from all the controversy around it, and there is a lot. Like if you Google it, pretty much every Image creator at that time had something to say about it. They did an open letter that Image published in previews about pulling the book and how disgusting it was. So there's lots of, but all that did was make issue number 1 the biggest selling book of the month because you couldn't get hold of it. People wanted it. People managed to get it. So it kind of, instead of just being quiet and letting people read it and think this is a pile of shit, I'm not buying issue 2 or 3 or whatever, people will almost force into getting the first 3 issues because of the pre-order system. You have to pre-order 3 books. So it made the book very, very popular. It wasn't. It just the figures looked that way. It's an appalling piece of crap that I've ever read in my life. It's awful. And not just because of the content in it, but the way it's written, the way it is. It's so awful. It's so mean-spirited. It's so in your face. It's one of those things that you think, oh, after you've read it, you need to go and have a shower, brush your teeth. You know, it's just not good. And the problem is now, Chaykin's going to be remembered for this book. You know, what's Chaykin done since? Nothing really. He's done a few indie books. He's done whatever, and I don't understand. Like, you know, I've heard stories about Chaykin at cons being a bit kind of racist and a bit sexist and a bit this and
I did meet him a few years ago, but very briefly. I was kind of trying to joke with him about him going to meet Stan Lee because I was there to meet Stan Lee. He was like, "No, why the fuck would I meet him? I've already met him." I was like, "Okay, can you do my sketch now, please, and I'll go."
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a curmudgeon, but I didn't know if he had harbored any of these views, or maybe not have got the sketch.
He wrote an independent, but I can't remember what it's called. But it has apparently has a trans rape in that as well. And
really?
And then he wrote another book that has a trans lady being beaten in that as well.
Bloody hell! Surely cut your losses. Why keep doing it?
What I got from this, that there's lots. We could do an entire podcast just on this one book.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it's in the first issue, and this attack on this lady is so brutally drawn. It's the only thing in the book that looks like he's took time on. Everything else looks like he's done it with a wax crayon. And you're thinking about it, so why? I just don't. And it's close-ups of things, and it shows a trans lady completely naked. It shows them. I'm not going into it, but it's awful.
No, it's fair enough.
It's not great.
Yeah.
And then in issue 3, when there's this hanging of it's implied that it's a Muslim female, but it's hard to tell with the artwork, to be honest. You could say it was a black person, you could say it was a Pakistani person, you could say it was a Muslim. You could say it was just a tan white guy, whatever. The way it's drawn, it's very weird. But she's dragged out, and it's so stereotypical. She's dragged out of a corner shop. And you think, oh my god,
Jesus,
is this where we are with this shit?
Right. I'll be honest, Dennis. I don't know if I want to talk about this anymore.
It's not. It is for me. I think it's one of the most controversial books, the most controversial things I've ever read in my life.
Wow.
And I don't understand why Image published it. I don't understand the thought process behind it. There have been books written about this sort of subject far better than this. There's lots and lots of books out there which have written about kind of America and the way things are going and the Islamophobia and stuff like that, and they have something to say. This doesn't seem like it's got anything to say.
No. Fair enough. We're coming to a close, Dennis. Thank you very much for that. It's been brilliant. You know, I probably should have said this at the start, but maybe it should have been a disclaimer for some of the subjects we're going to be talking about will be potentially triggering. I might record something for it, just might put that in towards the end. But do you have any kind of runners up? I
have been the issue, by the way. I don't actually have it anymore.
Oh, that's good.
I don't have it.
That's good. Burn it. So, do you have any runners up that you or dishonorable mentions?
Death in the Family.
Yep, good one.
I think, you know, beaten to death of a teenage boy, pretty controversial, and also the fact the fans chose to do it.
That was also mentioned by I am Jack's Musings. He said, "How about the fan voted death of Jason Todd?" So that's a good one. Yeah.
Didn't Frank Miller say it was really appalling or something?
Yeah.
I think he had. Yeah.
Coming from Frank Miller, that's surprising.
I know.
I had Spider-Man Sins Past, where Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, takes Gwen Stacy's virginity. So yeah, that's pretty dark and disturbing one. Superman and Big Barda make a porno.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
I've also got Ecstatics, or X-Force as they were known as well. The time they resurrected Princess Diana to be a new superhero.
Yeah, you remember you telling me about that one too.
Yeah, and then also Mod Wonder Woman.
See, I was thinking about the Spider-Man. Is it One More Day? where he just gives up his entire life.
Sells his soul to the devil.
Yeah, and forgets about everything else because I'm going to be married. And
who's the character who's effectively, could be considered a Catholic or a Christian, seems a bit little off. Great power and great responsibility. Seems something wrong there.
Teen Titans, the Judas Contract with
underage sex,
and the Green Lantern. Hal Jordan having a relationship with she's about 13.
Yeah, Aresia, I think she's called. She uses what she does. She uses the Green Lantern to age herself. She's like 13, but then she grows herself into a full woman. Don't know how the Green Lantern ring does that, but there you go.
There's a really good panel in that though, where all the major Green Lanterns that we know about are like, there's a picture of him kissing her, and everyone's like, all the mouths are dropped.
Yeah.
Like, what? It's quite good.
Bit dodgy.
There are quite a few.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to mention one last listener comment. So Jack Dobson says, I think my most controversial moment would be when Optimus Prime got killed off in the 1980s Transformers comic that was done by Marvel at the time, as it was quite the game changer. And the Ultimatum story arc from Ultimate Marvel was also controversial. So I'd agree there. I think that's the one where Optimus Prime loses a video game with Megatron because he cheated, and then he's like, "No, you've got to kill me anyway," so just kills him. And then he stores his brain on a floppy disk, I believe.
Floppy disk.
Yeah, back in the day, floppy disks.
There are lots of controversial stuff in comics, but at least they do make us talk about things.
Yeah, definitely.
We talk about kind of where movies are now and stuff. Comics have been doing it for years. Comics have been pushing the envelope for a very, very long time, whether people like it or whatever.
Yeah,
they have been doing it for years.
And that's I think it's important to have a dialogue. Not you're never going to agree with everybody. They're going to have strong opinions, and I think it's important to hear those opinions out. Especially the ones you disagree with. Even if they are horrendous and horrible, I think you've kind of got to hear them out to some degree, because that's freedom of speech, isn't it? And if we didn't have freedom of speech, then where would we be? And the ideas need to be passed around and to be discussed, and that's how we find our way in the world. Not being judged for those things. But it was a very interesting discussion overall. Yeah.
I just think, because it's quite a somber note we ended on. I just think it's important to kind of say, comics were having gay marriages way before TV and anything else.
Yeah,
doing it. We had
absolutely
characters taking front stage in comics. We had plus side superheroes. We've had lots of stuff in comics way before any other media caught up to it.
Absolutely.
So as much as sometimes you read stuff and think, oh, hang on, you also read stuff and think, yeah, that's excellent. I cried at Superman Up and Away number 6 the other day because the end of it was just so beautiful.
Wow.
And
powerful
that's
stuff.
What comics about. For every, Hyde and this, that, and the other, there is hundreds of the Superman stories.
Yeah, exactly.
About it.
There's some great stuff out there. I know this. I don't usually tend to harbor on the negative on these episodes and these podcasts. I try and be as positive about things as I can. I know this is quite a somewhat negative subject, but I think it's important to realize where mistakes are made and what's happened since. So it's important in the long run to know about these things and to not repeat these mistakes of the past. That's why we remember them. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you very much for everything today. That has been a fascinating list. Hope you enjoyed mine as well. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. You know where to find us. I'm not going to repeat it this week. You've heard it a million times before. It's 50 plus podcasts where I say where you can find us. So listen to that instead. Thank you, guys. Have a great time. Goodbye.